Hi, I'm Carrie. Um, I don't like to talk about myself, which is probably why Sean tried to extrapolate a lot of information out of me. So, but like you said, I'm a recovering dentist. I did it for a bit and didn't like it much. So I got out of the mouth, so to say, and into doing devices, and that's a lot more fun for me. Doing clinical trials and stuff. My first experience, I don't know if Arlen ever met him, but was with Dr. Bob Christensen with TMJ implants. And I don't know if any of you have ever had any experience with that gentleman, but he sued the FDA probably 3 or 4 times. Anybody know Dr. Bob Christensen?
I'm very familiar. I
Are
mean,
you?
personally.
Okay. Well, I worked with him. That was my first experience out of the mouth, but in the mouth, but into industry with him. And let's just say I got to know the FDA very well and how to not deal with the FDA, let's say. And my first experience was a cease and desist order with them, and they came in with, let's see, 3 huge Ryder trucks and 15 men with AR guns. And it was, sorry, Nellie, you about spit coffee. And they came in, I'm like, he's over there. And they took him away and let us all go home with our car keys, driver's license, and our house keys. And that was about it. And they took everything in the place. And it was basically for a, he refused to report MDRs. And at that time, my girlfriend, Maureen Mooney, who I'm sure I invited her to come. She refuses to talk about this to this day, but she was being charged $10,000 for each MDR that she did not report for his temporomandibular
So,
joints at that point in time.
Carrie,
Go ahead.
for the slow kids in the room, what is an MDR?
MDR for the US side, not to be confused, is medical device reportable event, not the,
Okay.
yeah. So this was back in, I want to say 1999. Dr. Bob, I'm going to call him infamously Dr. Bob, started selling temporomandibular joints, reconstruction of the joint back in 1964. He was a oral surgeon who invented, quote unquote, I should have brought some over here, but the fossa eminences and the temporomandibular, or, to replace people who had, TMJ, quote unquote, everybody has a TMJ, but disorders of the jaw. And so most of these patients, grind or do their joints, but most of them have other issues, I can say, as well. So they never quite go away, but these patients, will continue to have issues with their jaws, and they, if you replace them, they're going to continue to have dysfunctions of the jaw. And he continued to say that it wasn't his joint, but as most of you know, if you have a reportable event, your device caused or contributed, therefore you still are at liberty, or you must still report if your device caused or contributed to the event, right? So you have to report. He refused to report. So there was 22 events that he refused to report. And so the director of regulatory at that point, I was doing the marketing and teaching docs how to place these devices, as well as still working on the PMAs and doing the investigational IDEs and HDEs and all these at that point. But she was charged $10,000 for each of these events. So she was $250,000 for somebody who wasn't even planning on that. Is a bit of a hiccup. As well as him, he claimed, I think, bankruptcy at that point. He was in jail for about a week, but that was my first breakthrough on how not to deal with the FDA. So FDA got to know me at that point. I think I'm not necessarily known as somebody who to call, but I do get called a lot on a lot of events for whistleblowers. I was also called by them in the DOJ for the Theranos case. I was also called in on another case for another client of mine. I worked at Emergo for 9 years, where I ended up helping clear about 150 devices through the EU and the US. So they know my name at the FDA and is who to work with and who to work for. So they'll call me on clients that they've seen my name come through on submissions and stuff. So they'll ask me, what do you know about this? And if the DOJ calls me, I'll ask them, do I need an attorney? And they'll generally say no, but there was another case that just recently went through as well. So they'll call me on not necessarily whistleblower cases, but I'll tell them what they need to know, because I'll tell them the truth, right? I don't know, where did you go, Michelle, if you've been involved in any of these cases too, but you tell them what they need to know, right? And so I'm sure this last individual with why can't I think of the name of this company, but she just got 6 years from the DOJ. So the SEC trial hasn't even been gone through yet, where she was charging, it was StimWave. So she got charged, she was charging $18,000 for these neurostem implants that were being placed in your spine where they weren't even active. And so that was for 10 years worth of implants. So per patient, she was getting $18,000 per implant being implanted in there. And so it's quite a few implants. She only got 6 years from the DOJ though. And so it took about 5 years to try on that case. Go ahead, Michelle.
I worked for somebody that was banned from the industry by the FDA for like 15 years. And then they seized the company and all of its assets and shut it down. And then he just moved from Colorado to Arizona, and he started a new company. He had one of his cronies that was helping do all the bad stuff at the other company, but that guy wasn't banned from the FDA. So he put that guy up as the CEO of the new company, but behind the scenes, he still owned everything. And then he almost got Tucson shut down again, and Mexico. He almost got two more facilities shut down and seized before I, at 28, took a job there.
What
And now I'm
what Michelle
and
what
that's
Michelle
how I know.
yeah what Michelle is referring to is the infamous FDA debarment list, that once you go through some criminal type proceeding where you are accused of fraud or engaging in illegal activities, then you are placed on that list. And it depends on the crime. You could be placed for a number of years or permanently, which would not allow you to do any business with any regulated products.
How many companies are on the list? Is it a big list?
It's a pretty large list.
Is that
It's public.
Is public? Or do you have to Google to find that?
Yeah, just do when you go to the FDA website, just do debarment list, and you should be able to pick it up. If not, we can always send you a link.
Arlen,
Arlen.
I see a whole new series of LinkedIn posts for me. Being a spotter for a long time.
Arlen, your question should be good.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi.
My question is, with artificial intelligence, software is a medical device, embedded software, blah, 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 blah. Should artificial intelligence products be regulated like medical devices? And given the fact that they constantly change, should there be adverse events reporting mechanisms in place for artificial intelligence platforms?
Oh, there is, and there are. I had my midlife crisis and I got my whatever at Johns Hopkins, and they made me do software as a medical device. And my tenure at Sterling Medical Devices was all on software. And there is a whole new realm of software as a medical device and artificial intelligence. And there was a warning letter that just went out to a Colorado company on artificial intelligence. A lot of companies are writing. There is one product code for artificial intelligence that a lot of companies are using, where was down classified in the 21st Century Cures Act as a class 1 device, where they're saying their artificial intelligence is a class 1 device. I wonder if I could pull up that warning letter.
Well,
And
there's, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I understand that there's over 1,000 cleared software as a medical device platforms by the FDA. My question, maybe I didn't make it clear, was given that there's drift, given that there's change when you apply a different test population, it constantly changes. So how is there an adverse events reporting mechanism when you're using these things? Maybe you said it, but I just didn't understand it.
it depends on the intended use. It depends on the risk. It depends on what the patient population is, and it depends on what it's being used for. It depends on the algorithm as well. So, I mean, the dreaded "it depends" regulatory answer there, but software is based on the risk. So there's class 1, class 2, class 3s. There's a lot of drift in these cleared devices and what these softwares are doing. So a lot of these devices that have been cleared years ago, if they're continually taking these software and continually updating their software, there's drift in what the intended use is. And there's drift in what that algorithm is doing. And so unless they're doing, as that software changes, and unless they're doing the, looking at what that software and what it's doing affecting to that software upstream and downstream, that software is not doing the same thing as what it was intended to doing when it was originally cleared. And the FDA knows that. I mean, people are doing agile approaches where they're not writing down. You have to document according to the FDA. And if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And when software engineers, which I've worked with so many of them, they don't document. They go into these agiles, and they don't write it down. They're just doing these test cases, and they're just doing it, and it works and it goes. They're not looking at what it's doing downstream to the actual intended use. And what this software does today isn't what it was doing 12 years ago when they got it cleared as a software. So in these AI situations where they're doing, it's what it does this week is not at all what it did last week. And so if it's static or if it's
additional features being added into the software.
Pardon?
what was that, Fasan?
Are you talking about added features into the software, which is why it's like changing the intended use?
Anything. I mean, it can be anything that what these software companies are doing to it. And then there's that gray feature that they're doing for these clinical features, where it's not necessarily software for medical intended use. And then there's clinical that a lot of these companies were doing that the FDA went through and were giving warning letters to for clinical indications, where they down classified it as a class 1, but they were kind of riding that gray,
Area.
phase where they were saying it wasn't a medical device, but then in reality, it was a medical device.
Couple of things that maybe I can supplement with. One is there's a difference between the software manufacturer and the medical device manufacturer. So it is important to understand that when the software manufacturer makes changes to the software, they are expected, they're required to notify the medical device manufacturer, because that is going to have an impact on the ability of that medical device to do the work that it's intended to be done. And then it is the responsibility of the medical device manufacturer to evaluate that change and to determine whether or not that change is substantial enough to change the, let's call it the critical quality attributes or critical performance attributes of the medical device. So it is correct that things evolve and change. However, they have to be analyzed. It's not any different from what happens with any typical medical device where companies change from one supplier to another, or they change one material class to another. And some of these changes may seem to be small, but they actually can be very significant. So in the end, it all comes down to, do you have a change control system in place that does that type of evaluation, and the extent to which then you need to notify the FDA about those changes.
What about notifying the person who bought the software? So if you're a hospital or a medical practice and you bought this AI quote solution and it goes through all this rigmarole that you're describing, is there such a thing as a product recall? And secondly, if something like sepsis, we all know the story of people telling us the wrong thing about predictive analytics for sepsis. It didn't work. So is there a product recall? And secondly, who gets notified
So there
when
are
these things when these things drift?
So there are FDA driven product recalls, which are class 1, class 2, class 3 recalls, one being the highest for that. And then there are market recalls where the company will do it. You don't want the FDA to do a product recall. Those are bad. Done a few of those. And then you don't really want to do a market driven recall because the FDA is going to look at that and say, well, is there something else going on? And they will look at any market correction is usually what the company is going to call it when they do a software driven recall. Dexcom just had a class 1 recall that they had to do for their software driven AI for their readers on the for A1C readers, wasn't it? I
think you're right. Glucose monitoring devices.
Yeah, for their glucose readers for A1C, right? Wasn't it for the, yeah, they just had a class 1 recall that they had to do for their AI reader. So that was an FDA driven one. Was it FDA or their company? I think Dexcom recalled it. So you will see, Marlon, that they do a market recall in the hospital for it.
So I have a question. How do predetermined change control plans come into this and memo to file? So
that's, yeah.
So I understand that you can do a memo to file for minor changes and that they've done like 60 PCCPs to date. The FDA has cleared like 60 of them or something like that. And so, these are new mechanisms that are in place primarily for software as a medical device.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a new thing. The FDA doesn't necessarily know what they're doing with them now, in my opinion. So with the 21st Century Cures Act, all of a sudden software became part of the definition, right? So now the FDA, now it's a regulation, FDA now puts guidances in place that you now need to follow because that's faster than putting it in as a regulation, which is a law. So now the FDA developed this new digital group that now is trying to put everything into practice, which Lord knows what's going on with the FDA now, but they let out that whole digital group go. Now they hired them all back. So now they're all back trying to get everything back in place, right? So we now have a digital group and they're trying to get all these regulations. Then we put this whole new AI regulation back in place, or, they put a new thing in legislation, which there's a piece of it that has to do with the digital health and part of medical devices. So we have all of that where now the FDA is still trying to figure out what's going on with that. Software as a medical device, and it's moving faster than what we can even put into regulation. So they're all still trying to figure it out. they want you to develop software. I don't know, when's the last time you guys have done an E-Star for software as a medical device? I just submitted one a couple weeks ago. There is a lot of stuff you have to put in your E-Star. When's the last time you guys have submitted one? Michelle or Nelly?
Too bad Jose isn't on the line. 'Cause
I
he's-
know, because
Yeah.
Jose's talk is going to be phenomenal because there's so much stuff you have to do for cybersecurity. You have to put
Yeah.
in,
A
how
lot
are
of
you going to
stuff about
update it?
cybersecurity and all.
By the
Yeah,
way,
it is.
the link I just shared, it's 8 years old, but for those of you who know Joseph Gulfo, he did a great talk at 10X 8 years
You
ago
have to
about
do so much
20th Century
penetration
Act.
testing. Yeah.
Mhm.
They have this new thing you have to do called penetration testing, which is a pain in the buttocks. And so I'm regulatory, I tend to have verbal vomit with the, so engineers don't necessarily understand what I'm saying when I talk, because you know they're all bullet points, and that's where Jose is fabulous because he could do the engineering speak. So there's a difference, there's a whole bunch of paperwork out, and if you go through the E-Star, you have to add in all these documents that aren't just the SBOM. The SBOM is the software bill of materials, but there's all kinds of other documents that have to go in there, including penetration testing. When I was at Sterling before that whole debacle, talk about that later, but there are very few people that are certified in penetration testing, which goes through your software and makes sure that nobody can hence penetration testing, your software, break into it and make sure that it's basically bulletproof. That's not to say that next week, one of these kiddos, because they actually hire these 12-year-old little whippersnappers who can break into your software and, break into it and, figure out how to break it all down. And that's what happened to, when, I don't know how long ago it was, but Cheney's pacemaker, they broke into it and shut it down. And that's how this whole thing started with, he had a, not Medtronic, but Boston Scientific pacemaker, and they were able to turn it off. Somebody broke into it, turned it off. So that's when all this started with his pacemaker to break it off.
When we did the penetration testing with our cycler, so it's an APD cycler, so it's not only just about the software, it's about the hardware as well. So even if you're like, let's say software is bulletproof, someone can still like attach some pins to the board and read data from the RAM and like tamper with it. So we had to go down to that physical level as well.
And they want to know what kind of testing you're doing upfront in your E-Star testing. And so, you have to tell them this is how we're doing it and this is what we do. So they want to know for the lifetime of your product, this is what we're planning on doing. And that's where your PPCP is coming in and what you're planning on doing for your product in 3 months. And so when you have a product that you're submitting with your as software as a medical device or software in a medical device, this is what we're doing. This is how we plan on doing it. So if you've submitted one to the FDA, you now have this software as a medical device. When you make a change to your software as a medical device, you have to go through this whole checklist. And then if you have software in your medical device, now there's this other set of 5 questions, which I'm sure they're going to change this guidance, but you also have to do this memo to file and put it in your design history file as to this is what we also have looked through and have we made any changes to this, which include cybersecurity, penetration testing, life cycle management, and go through the 63, the IEC life cycle management, risk management. And risk is the new 4-letter word with the FDA. You have to go through all of this, which includes, Arlen, your favorite word, favorite thing to do with respect to all of this usability testing. Hence usability testing. Can we break it?
So tell us for a moment. So we have a lot of regulatory people on the call. The world is shifting very, very quickly thanks to AI, thanks to all these things, and as a seasoned regulatory professional and seasoned with dealing with the FDA, how do we prepare for these changes around software as a medical device, software in a medical device, cybersecurity, all of these things that are going to make a regulatory affairs person essential to the company are going to, you know, I talk about the universities training people for the job market of 5 years ago, you know, the idea of bringing manufacturing jobs back to the US, you know, preparing for the past. We need to be preparing for the future. We look to countries like China that are preparing their workforce for the future. So how do we prepare regulatory professionals for the future? And I'd like to, you know, open this up to, you know, anyone and everyone on the call, but Carrie, you go first.
Well, come listen to Jose. I think he's going to offer a lot of insight on training for software as a medical device. I mean, you have to stay current with professionals who actually are doing it currently every day. You have to stay current with the FDA's current guidances. They don't know necessarily what they're doing. I find it frustrating, Michelle. I think you probably can too. Like with the FDA, I just submitted a submission. I don't know how many submissions I've submitted with the FDA where, I mean, I have a submission. You have to use, like I said, you know, the current documents. You're introducing a device that's been used in every other part of the body. I'm using it with a new indication, with a new part of the body. And this division is like, well, we don't have an indication for use in this part of the body. Therefore, we're going to give you an NSE. And I'm like, it's used in every other part of the body. That's why we're introducing it to this part of the body. It's safe. And they're like, well, you know, it's not in the body, therefore we're not going to do it now. In the old days, I was able to clear it, no problem. Now they're saying, well, now we're not going to do it. So now I have to negotiate with them, and that's why they'll right away now give you an NSE. And I'm like, no. So now I have to negotiate with them and say, it's you know, it's easy. So we do the step, or we do the breakthrough designation. So we have to not accept an NSE, you know, have them give us a step. So
How do we educate? I mean, this issue of how do we educate reg affairs people is one thing. How do you educate surgeons to do this? I mean, given the complexity of all of this and the ever-changing nature of it.
oh, there's Jose.
Surgeon entrepreneurs and anybody else that's trying to get an idea to a patient, how do you get them to sort of reg affairs for dummies, or what's the way to do that?
I mean, they have to be open. It's really hard to teach. It's really hard to teach old dogs new tricks. Just the same way it's really hard to teach software engineers to document everything. They have to be open to it, which again, you know, it's sometimes it's just people. You have to be able to talk to people. They have to be open to it. I don't know any other way it's just teaching. So you have to have people skills all in all. I don't know if anybody else has any other ways to say that. You know, surgeons are surgeons. It's the difference between, Arlen, you know this, teaching neurosurgeons versus orthopedic surgeons. They're different groups of people.
Yeah.
So
my view is this: we have to do this. Well, we are trying to do this in medical school, and
yes.
actually in pre-med. This starts way before you get out there. And it means culling down the people who have the right mindset, to your point. If you don't want to do this, don't do it. Don't waste our time. But if you're genuinely interested in going down this road and upskilling your competencies, then that's how I think we should do it. And we're trying it. And I would rather spend time on 3 people than throw out a safety a net and say, well, we want anybody to show up, because they're not going to follow through.
You got to read the room, you know.
Arlen, I agree. Because I mean, coming from, I myself, I'm a dentist, and having no real training of dental school or anything like that, but regulatory is completely foreign. I will say that for sure, if somebody wants to learn something, there are plenty of tools in order for you to figure it out. especially with AI and ChatGPT, you could literally from scratch just go and say, hey, what's going on here? And then you just kind of go through loopholes. So I think if, like you said, if there's 3 people and just hone in on them and then give them the tools in order for them to not so much put everything in their brain, but give them the tools so that they know how to put whatever they want in their brain into their brain. And I think that's the more efficient way of just teaching them how to actually gather the data than rather than give them the data.
The other thing I found is I have a client who hired software engineers who've never done medical device. And so they've designed this software device. And an engineer tried to teach them how they had to comply with these requirements for medical device. And we went through like 3 or 4 different people. And the other thing is finding someone that speaks the same language as that specific person who's already been trained, that has the power of persuasion. Because I can say it to them, or an engineer or project manager, and they're like, look, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 20 years. Even though I'm getting into medical devices first product, you don't know what I know. And so, but then you get another engineer who all of a sudden that person's saying the same thing you're saying, and they're coming back to you. We have to do this now. So I mean, it's finding that right partner.
Just wanted to say something, because this is what I see in the industry all the time. I think there are basically 3 parties that you have to keep in mind. One is the FDA and how the FDA interprets the regulation. And FDA is not always right. Most of the time they are. The second is, like you said, the engineer, who is the person who probably doesn't understand the regulation. They understand the technical part of developing the software. And then the third person is, let's call it the quality or compliance person within an organization, who really understands exactly what the FDA expectation is. Sometimes you have a perfect scenario, perfect storm, where you got somebody from the FDA who doesn't know, an engineer who doesn't know, and then somebody from quality and compliance who doesn't know either. And that brings a lot of complication. And it's part of the problem the industry has sometimes, because we overregulate ourselves. Because when we don't know, we take a very conservative approach. So I think that the balance is really, are the right people with the right level of knowledge, skills, and experience doing the job they're supposed to do? And if that's the case, it should be fine. But when that's not the case, there's trouble.
What I found, especially when I was at Emergo, is there's a lot of companies that way overcomplicate things. There's design procedures that are 500 pages long, and the FDA will come in, and most of those 483s are on companies are not following their procedures. And they'll go to page 57 of your design procedure and say, you are not doing on page 53, line item C. And they'll go to your procedure and you know, on when you were doing design phase A, or design phase, you did not follow design, your procedure, and they'll dock you on it. Keep it simple, keep it to the regulations, and just don't paint yourself in a corner.
Yep.
There was one time this poor lady, this FDA inspector, and FDA inspectors are people too. Everybody's a person, everybody goes to the bathroom the same way. Everybody eats the same way. People have bad days. This woman called me, or the manager called me. The FDA inspector had this woman in a corner. He was yelling at her. This guy and it was a union job. And he had her in the corner, was yelling at her, and she basically had a breakdown. She was at Abbott at that point. And I was like, dude, go away. You need to go home for the day, leave her alone. And I mean, it was awful, but he ended up having to go back to desk duty for that. Whatever. I flew down to Florida and helped him out, helped them out of a, whatever. Those two just were, piss and vinegar. I don't know what's going on between that FDA inspector and her, but it was, they were not doing well together, obviously, in a room, and he needed not to be an FDA inspector anymore. But it's just like interviewers. I remember when I was going into dental school, I had you had the one who's like, what books do you read? The nicest guy in the world. And the other one's like, drills you in the corner. And then You just have to, and it like what, we have everything, my procedures will read, there's the bullet points for the engineers, there's the novel for and then there's the flow charts for the visual people. So you just kind of have to, all my presentations will have a bullet point, they'll have the visual, and then there's then there's always the links for the people who need to see it all for themselves in black and white. So it's just keep it to the facts, keep it very to the point. It's the same thing when you're answering your 483's response to the FDA, or whenever you're putting it in there, just keep it very black and white. It's not personal. And it's the same way when you're answering your response to the FDA, you just need to keep it very black and white. They don't need anything personal. It's just keep it clear, detailed, organized. It's never a person's fault.
Playfully,
That's
let me
exactly what I
interject
did
here and
with-
say, I'm having a hard time training Rama to just take herself off mute, put on her camera and ask for questions. She keeps writing these long things in the
Oh, and I don't even have my chat.
chat.
RNA, sorry.
Rama,
That's
can
exactly like the thing
encourage
you
you to
described
come
about
on
the
camera?
assistants. Like making a flow chart, bullet points, that's exactly what I did. And while working with engineers, but the other thing that I found helpful was just to like explaining them the importance of why we are doing what we are doing, like how it will like create value for them down the line. Let's say like after a year or two, a new engineer comes in and he tries to like change a feature, and then he will like once he's about to do that, he will be able to see the history, like why that let's say that feature is there, like which requirement did it come from, or like what hazard is it mitigating. So that was like very helpful in getting the systems implemented. That's what we found.
Now I hear Rama's currently helping a client land a pre-sub meeting to declassify their medical device and general wellness product while maintain focus, revise intended use and labeling. What's your experience in negotiating products to transition? Again, it's all about the claims. There is a general wellness product guidance. You can use that. You have to word it creatively. You look at the guidance. There's examples at the end. I don't know what the intended use is. I've helped a client, and I don't want to say it because whenever I say the name on it, I get every single ad on every single feature on my everything, and every one of you will get it as well on every single one of your phones and Instagram and Facebook. So I'm not going to say the name of the client, but you have to word it and look how the wording is and be very creative about the wording and the whether it's a wellness product or whether it's read the intended use, and if it's a physical claim of to diagnose or help the device. Go ahead,
cure
David.
or mitigate. Yeah.
Right.
Learn the definition and stay there.
And look at similar devices and look
Yep.
at the intended uses of similar devices and stay away from those similar devices intended uses. And look at
read
warning letters. Oh, touche.
Yeah.
Rama,
Because
did you have
it's
anything you wanted to
or
add? Rama, did you have anything you wanted to add now that you're on camera? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always more of a listener than a speaker, but thank you so much, Carrie, for the clarification. Yeah, the intended uses and the claims are certainly the focus, in line with the general wellness guidance. But I just thought it might be interesting, in a pre-sub meeting with the FDA, what kind of things could be expected in terms of like a positive results. Like, for example, would a simple letter confirming that the FDA is in alignment with the proposed, agenda to transition this product into no longer a regulated medical device. In terms of like negotiating with the FDA, the results of this kind of meeting, what can one expect? Is it simply okay to have the confirmation from FDA and then that's it?
So for QSEPs, the FDA will never confirm or deny. They will just give you quote unquote recommendations and tell you if you want actual recommendation, you know, confirmation, submit a 513G. They will always ask, you know, at no more than 5 questions. They will never give you more than that. I would ask the detail in writing if you want the actual, but again, it's non-determination, you know, it's just their recommendations. And go with very concrete questions and what you are asking them. If you are going with the face-to-face, not, I mean, they haven't been really doing face-to-face, but if you are going with a teleconference, let them do most of the talking. And I would also ask for written feedback as well, because that's where you're going to get most of your really good feedback, but let them do the talking. Because
David,
that's where you're going to get all of it. And don't argue with them. It's more of a collaborative relationship. And if you want specialists in the room, ask for the specialist in the room from the general wellness group, that you're, whatever group you're going for your intended use, but ask for what you want your claims to be and ask for the exact feedback you want to get from them. Don't
Carrie,
ask general questions because they're not going to give you the feedback.
in the interest of time, I'd like to get to David.
Yep. Sorry. Go ahead, David.
I'm going to ask you a pointed question. David.
I want to go back to Arlen, but first I want to say there is so much wisdom being put on the table for everyone who perhaps has never heard it. So many gems are coming out, Joe. I guess I'd like to see the transcript come, but I don't think you do that. But it's just wonderful.
Someone has a trick.
But this is wonderful.
I've started writing follow-up articles every week.
You could, you could make a whole MDG out of any one of the things that Carrie said today.
I know.
Oh,
to David's point.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back to Arlen when he asked the question about how do we train these people or whatever. I think you have to remember MDs you were mentioning. An MD, if they're really good, is an inventor. They're inventive. They push a needle into something or a wire or, you know, put a heart valve in and they say, I could do it better if I twist and turn and bend this device a little. I'll get the better angle. You know, and they may have taken the device obviously off label use or they're doing the way they want to do it. And they're inventive. So that's just simple devices. What about when we get to the AI devices? It's the wild, wild west, I think. Thanks,
in Colorado.
Everywhere.
I would just observe that there's a difference between an invention and an innovation. And there's certainly a difference between an invention and something that has commercializable potential. In my world, I'd say about 1% of the people that I deal with, white coats, have an entrepreneurial mindset. We don't teach it in school. We don't teach it in residency. We don't teach it in practice. We don't teach it, period. Some of us are trying to change that, including the people on this call. But the fact of the matter is they don't have an entrepreneurial mindset. That's a big hurdle. And I agree with you. I mean, I'm an ENT surgeon. We're gadgeteers. We all come up with gadgets and we do that. And I've had that experience of never getting that product over the goal line, which is part of the reason I'm doing what I'm doing. But I'm trying, this group is trying to change that. And it's a long haul, but we need, it takes a village kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Hi, Carrie.
Hi, Ed.
My question draws out a little bit from this because I think all the stuff you've been saying is great, but it also feels like it's a little bit, how the system has been working. And, my big concern, particularly as a medical device company outside of the US, just in the past week, we've now had another layer of complexity. The first complexity from the beginning of this new administration is HHS, leader and DOGE, and now we have tariffs on top of that. My question is, what is the prospect from where we sit today for a company outside of the US wanting to bring a device into the US market right now? And what on earth is your best view of what the FDA is going to be able to handle? Or should we just keep our hands off and go to other markets for now?
I believe, well, I'm an optimist, so I'm thinking from the way it looks, since they hired back all the CDRH group, and it looks like most of the damage appears to be, I don't know if most of you can agree with this, on the CBER side, that the device side looks like might be in good, we might be good. I don't know.
But I heard that like some senior people at FDA have all left or been forced out.
This is true. Most of the senior people with respect to the division sides on the ODE, the Office of Device Evaluation, are all still there. So I have a lot that are in the queue right now for device evaluation, and that's a good thing. So I'm optimistic about that. They don't evaluate my device evaluation, and I'm okay with some of the people that have left with respect to the device with the inspection side. I don't know, Michelle or
yesterday
Nellie.
I attended a webinar from RQM Plus on this very subject with two speakers, and they were talking about the impact and the uncertainty with regard to all this. I can I was thinking about asking that speaker to come on here. Would that be of interest?
I would be really interested.
What did they say,
and again, it's
Sean?
not just for me. They're actually a company I'm working with is looking at bringing their device to and again, I don't know, this week, today, I think this minute it's a 10% tariff, but it might be 20%. Lord knows. And all that does is
the
just
tariffs for bringing them into the US.
With regard to the
device
tariff,
side,
I don't think anybody can say with any.
yeah, I don't know about that side.
But
Edward.
my sense is that I think a company should move forward with the regulatory approval. I think that the approval process is going to remain more or less the same, although
Consistent, yeah.
timelines there is some speculation that the timelines might be.
We just asked my reviewer, and she said we're on time for getting your response back.
Oh, wow.
My response is due on April 14th. She said we're on time for getting your response back by April 14th for this step. So
here's my recommendation. I mean, what we are experiencing now, it's a little bit of change, but I think
a little bit. Sorry.
But what I wanted to say is that the FDA, in my opinion, the innovation that we have experienced in the pharmaceutical and medical device industry has probably surpassed a little bit the skills and capabilities that they have been able to be exposed to. So I always say that if they may be 5 to 7 years behind where the industry is. So I think that really what's important here is for us in the industry is to really be as smart as we can be in terms of making sure that whatever submissions we make now, especially now, that we follow that pattern that you were talking about. Be precise, keep things simple, straightforward, maintain things well documented, be ready to present things first time, right? So that when you are speaking with them, you're doing that in a way that they don't have to come back, that they can get it. Because a lot of the problems that I see with our industry is that level of complexity that we try to bring, that we think that the more is better, when in reality, better is more. And better meaning be precise, be simple. And that's all we have to do, especially at this moment of transition where there's a major generational gap between the people who are reviewing submissions today and the people who used to review them years ago. And that learning curve for these new reviewers, it's going to be painful. So we're going to have to help them. That's
We
my
have to train
perspective.
them. They're very
Yes,
green.
yes, absolutely.
Well, one of the things I do at Bushman QC is I actually design my checklist to align with my procedure that aligns with my standard. So even if you, heaven forbid, I wouldn't want you to do this, but even if you didn't read my procedure, if you picked up my form, you're 90% there, you're going to be successful. And the other thing is I write my procedures all at the 7th grade level. And
Yes.
matter of fact, it shocks me. I had an FDA inspection going on, and she picked up one and she goes, wow, this is the most detailed, best procedure I've read in a while. And it was actually using not eStar, it was using the ESG system. And she's like, I've never seen anybody write one. And I thought, wow, I'm going to take that one and put it in my pocket, because I don't think I've ever had an FDA auditor say that to anybody.
The last FDA lady, she didn't even know what the ESG system was. So that one was amazing to me, that she didn't even know what that was, or her registration and listing system is. So they aren't even training within their own system. So that was a little disheartening, but then again, that's where we get to train the FDA, because they're all green right now.
I think my inspector had done 10 inspections. And what I find, and this is the last 2 inspectors I've dealt with, is they have less than a handful of inspections, and they inspect you, then they take everything back, and then an entire department.
Oh yeah.
You. And then it's
well,
like,
maybe that's what Dodge just got rid of. So I don't.
And here's the point: if you don't do it the way you guys are talking about, you're going to get a very negative reaction. You're going to get 483s. Right. You're going to get warning letters on stuff that is nonsensical, that makes no technical sense. But because they didn't understand it, they're going to cite you.
They don't
understand. Because they didn't get it, and now they're upset. And you know what? I say it's my fault. It's our fault that we didn't do the job to really make it clear, simple, and straightforward to them.
Mm-hmm. But that's because the staff didn't understand it. So it's our job to train the industry.
Yep.
Okay, so let me have you hold off on your comment, because we're at the top of the hour. Carrie, a number of people have said in a number of different ways, David perhaps most eloquently, about the value on this call and how many things, and Michelle's like, each of these could be a talk unto itself. Having said that, there was so much that I would love it if you could take 5 minutes to field no questions other than this one. And that is, if somebody tunes in for just 5 minutes, if we make a synopsis of this call and we make a video, what are the main things you would like someone to take away from this talk?
So I guess general tips for the industry when it comes to navigating regulatory processes like FDA negotiations is understand the regulatory landscape, stay current with relevant regulations, standards, and guidance documents, such as right now ISO 14971 for risk management, and the FDA's quality system requirements for 21 CFR 820 and ISO 13485. Monitor updates in policies and technological advancements that can impact compliance requirements. 2, plan early and strategically. When you're developing your regulatory strategy early in the product development and process, do it right the first time. This includes identifying any potential risks, regulatory pathways, and submission timelines. Know what markets you're going to go to upfront, so you can plan all of the standards and guidances you need to comply with upfront. Engage with regulatory bodies early, like pre-submission meetings, to gain feedback and clarity on expectations. Plan it into your device design. Again, emphasize risk management. Adopt a robust risk management framework, incorporate risk management, include the identification of critical tasks, use tools like FMEAs to ensure thorough assessment, risk management strategies, document everything. Again, you've heard it a million times. If it's not documented, it never happened. I would maintain clear, detailed, organized documentation. This includes all test data, clinical evaluations, risk analysis, usability studies, Traceability is key for regulatory success. Document. Collaborate cross-functionally. This includes regulatory, quality assurance, R&D, regulatory affairs, all departments. Everybody needs to be aligned cross-functionally on objectives to ensure a collaborative, cohesive approach. Don't forget about regulatory. Engage with experts, work with regulatory consultants, legal experts, whenever you need to navigate across complex requirements or develop submission strategies. R&D, don't work in your silos, collaborate. Always test for usability and safety. Don't forget about your usability requirements. Conduct thorough usability standards and safety tests to identify potential hazards up front and ensure you've dealt with them to ensure compliance in human factors engineering guidelines. FDA is looking at these up front, so a lot of times those are a lot of holes that the FDA comes back with now and says, where's your usability studies? CB, it's another one. Be transparent and responsive. Respond to all regulatory questions and deficiencies promptly and transparently, and be thorough. Build trust and open communication with the FDA and attention to detail. A lot of times when you do this, you can go through your submissions without getting a letter, and you can just work with the FDA and hopefully get your approval letters quickly. Leverage data and technology. I like to use real world evidence a lot of times in my submissions, so you can get, you don't have to do all the clinical studies that they want. Use data analytics, digital tools to track compliance. A lot of times in my software as a medical device, I'll use data, truth data. I'll use past ICOM data and everything like that, so I don't have to do more clinical studies to enhance decision-making through product life cycle.
You know,
and then,
I want you to talk for 5 minutes. I didn't think you would do it without a breath.
Oh, and then just one more: foster quality culture, embed a strong culture of quality and compliance throughout your organization.
So Sean,
Ensure everybody understands maintaining regulatory. There you go.
We need to replay this at 50% speed.
Was that fast? Did I talk fast?
Also, Carrie,
was I doing New York?
You must have read that. So you have a sheet or a poster or something. Please send that so we can publish it. Because I don't know about you people, but I heard a lot of words that I could nod to, but I wouldn't be able to repeat what you just said. There's just too much.
If not, that's where Sean's transcription is going to come into play.
Yes, absolutely true. And for those of you who might be on the fence about coming, can you imagine just having lunch with Carrie and talking about what you're working on? Because that's...
I just had surgery last week, and my doctor's like, we had to give you Versed to shut you up. It was pretty funny.
We have meds that we'll be serving there. Typically it takes the form of ice cream, but we could spike yours.
That'd be good.
Joe, let me say one brief thing about this call and many others, because you had a couple of folks here who aren't regular attendees. And the way I characterize this weekly event is it's a little bit like going to church. There could be a really good sermon, but you don't know if you don't go all the time. I
tried to get my friend Billy to come. If he would have come, you guys would have had really holy water. He's funny.
I use this philosophy as well when talking about rationalizing buying lottery tickets, but that's a different thing.
Carrie, can Billy come and join you?
I'm trying to get him. He went to London this week to play with friends. I'm like, London and having pints of Guinness versus coming to this, whatever. But I'm trying to get him to come. He lives in Las Vegas. Billy Sutton, he wrote 21 CFR 830. Oh. I'm like, boy, that's riveting.
That's a familiar name.
But he's actually quite lovely. So
I see that he's on the tentative list, according to Sean. So
yeah. So he lives in Las Vegas. I mean, all we have to do is scoot him over, right? That's not that far.
What we need to do is scoot them. We have a number of people in Orange County that we're also trying to get to scoot about 10 miles away, but sometimes
right.
Get them that last couple miles. Sean, take us take us home and maybe an update on maybe something that we don't have on the website yet about our in-person meeting?
So we keep adding more sessions, adding more workshops. This is going to be an amazing event. Also, I've started doing write-ups of these calls. In case you didn't see the one from last week, take a look at that. It's on MedTech Leading Voice and .com, and so that just takes you right to LinkedIn. When I publish these, I would love it if you guys would like, comment, reshare. Reshare with comments is better than just repost. So repost with comments, and help us spread the word. I think these calls are really valuable, and when there's this kind of collaboration and a lot of smart people get together, that's when good things happen. So with that in mind, I look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at 10X. And thank you, Joe, as always, for being a charming host.
Fantastic call.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. I'll see as many of you in person as possible. Chadwick,
Looking
I'm
forward
looking
to ice cream.
for ice cream, and I've already got the fun movies picked out, so some really good ones. I even tested them on my Jennifer, so I'm feeling pretty solid on these.
Good.
Have a good day, everyone. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.